saying is, let's have a more healthy debate about what the right mix and right fit is for each neighborhood, rather than a kind of steady pushback to everything.
So what's happening in Kits right now is there are two developments for old people, both of which are extraordinarily dense and which have radical impacts on their neighbors. And the most amazing reaction from City Hall is simply to bulldoze the things into existence. There is no consultation with the neighborhood. There is no decent engagement with the neighborhood. And frankly, the city officials are mendacious in their relationship with the citizen. So in that context, it's very difficult for the citizen to do anything but oppose. So we need a different relationship between government and neighborhoods. And even though the people within the neighborhood are willing to welcome the old people into the neighborhood, the conditions under which that happens should be discussed with the neighbors. They shouldn't just be imposed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
can I make a suggestion that we're going to have lots of opportunity for sort of robust conversation upstairs? Because we only have 10 minutes for questions, could I ask you to pose questions directly to Monty about his presentation, and we can leave our nuanced conversations about larger issues for upstairs. So,
Garvin?
Yeah, I'd like to address 2 points that you made. One was one of the largest percentage of replied back from the homeless population that you polled was that income was a barrier to having homes. And yes, if we could have, again, you're saying supportive programs, I would really like to, again, encourage the community to, like Monty says, don't give, you can't throw money at it, but if you support locally the programs that we have here, I think that would make a change. And the other thing was, again, as many of us who are in that housing situation aren't ready to go into housing or indoor housing or be housed indoors, where many cities like Portland have tent cities. They move, they're not permanent, they move around. But models like that, I don't understand why there's such a resistance to if they don't want homeless people just scattered throughout our communities, why not make areas or spaces available for us to for those people or us in that situation to congregate, and at least there's safety in numbers. I think I know, but yes, could you address it?
Well, I mean, there's this interesting historical context, because we did have tent cities. We did have those kind of things. What we've seen in the last decade or two is that the tent cities turn into the same thing that unmanaged SROs turn into. The same sorts of drug dealers move in, and they quickly become not healthy, homeless tent cities, but really dangerous places. If there were a way to have a tent city that didn't become that dangerous and violent, I think it would be worth looking at, and if it were managed, I mean, there might be ways, but then you get to the question of, is that something we're comfortable with? For the money it would take to do the management of a good tent city, you could probably build the portables, the sort of stopgap housing kind of environment, and have a better structural environment and the same management problems. So, who else? Yeah?
Can you tell us how you conducted the survey?
The survey was not conducted by me. It was conducted by the Metro Vancouver. And they do a count every 3 years. You can read about it online. There were hundreds of volunteers who went out on one day with a questionnaire and contacted whoever we could find was homeless with a group of questions, and then they were asked about it. I'd be happy to give you more details later and point you to where you can find it. It's done every 3 years, and it's kind of a hole in our data, because we do it here in Metro Vancouver. There's a few other parts of the province that do it. Most of the province has no homeless count, no homeless survey. So, for example, right now, my suspicion, just based on anecdotal evidence, is that homelessness is rising faster right now in the suburbs and some of the sort of mid-sized cities across the province, but we have no numbers to verify that. Hi.
Some cities around the world, through community support, are offering mentoring system where they're one-on-one with a homeless person through their addiction and all that. Are there any services in Vancouver offering that now?
I'm not aware of a formal program, although it may exist.
Well, didn't you say that there was 2 homeless persons for every athlete to get the Olympics?
What I will say, though, is when I see people who become engaged with this issue, in whatever capacity, volunteering, you see normal friendships form. They end up meeting homeless or street-involved people with similar backgrounds to their own, and normal friendships emerge, and a kind of very informal mentoring happens. And I agree that informal mentoring, those informal contacts, I think are part of what get people better. They are the citizen version of what outreach workers do. And I think it's a huge part of the answer. I hope you talk about it upstairs. There's somebody over here. Hi.
Yes, hi. I noticed at the beginning of your talk, you talked about the fact that lack of income was key to the homeless issue, but I'm a little disappointed and somewhat surprised you haven't mentioned the barriers that the Campbell Liberals brought in 2002 to attaining welfare. That, to me, is so key to this issue because that's when we really began to see in the early years of 2000. In this decade, we saw the huge increase in homeless. I was a welfare worker in the West End, and in the 80s, 90s, sorry, it was not great, God forbid, but walking down Davie Street in 2002, 2003, 2004, I quit the ministry in 2004, it was horrendous. And it seems to me that that is such a clear issue that doesn't seem to be mentioned. The opposition don't mention it. And I'm a little, like I said, a little disappointed that, I mean, that was so key, and I'm wondering why that wasn't part of your...
I think you're completely right. I have no quibble with your critique at all. There were several factors that drove homelessness this decade, and the SRO rooms are one. I agree the welfare question was one. I think a change in patterns of drug use was also one here. I mean, I think there are several pieces, and my sense is that through the outreach programs, the province has backtracked from that a bit.
They created a monster.
They created a monster and they backtracked a bit from it, but I don't think they've backtracked officially. What they've done is kind of created exceptions to their own rules.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really viable point. I mean, we could have another evening, and I would love to do it sometime, and talk about what the costs and benefits would be of closing the gap between what it takes to live here and what welfare and basic services pay. My suspicion is the same kind of numbers that exist for homelessness in terms of benefits to all of us from closing that gap would exist, but I don't have that research. Hi.
Hi. I also wanted to draw the connection between people who are homeless and students who are having a hard time finding a place to live, finding themselves underhoused too, because the housing costs in the city, to buy a house in the city, it's more than doubled in the last 10 years. Rents have gone up enormously. There is an enormous lack of affordable housing, and it's not just for people who are homeless.
Right.
It's a continuum, and I think we make a mistake when we talk about the homeless as a fixed group, because it's not a fixed group at all.
That's
It's
right.
completely fluid. It's people who are, for a period of time, without a home. And to me, the affordable housing issue is the one, that's why we're losing SRO rooms, is because the land is valuable, those rooms are valuable, far more valuable than they used to be.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It reminds me there's a little thing you can fill out, I think a form from the TIE, and we will mail you another series we've done, completely unconnected to this, about affordable housing, about that issue exactly.
It's connected to this.
It is absolutely connected to this. Yeah. To shrink the problem down somewhere, we had to make divisions, and so for this talk, we've looked at the long-term homeless. And what makes Vancouver a little different than many other cities, including other cities in Canada, is we have a higher proportion of people who have been on the street for 1 or 2 years, whereas in many other places, it's more as you described. People come in and out for a few months as they struggle. For whatever reason, Vancouver has created almost like a permanent underclass. It's possible that that was created in part during that 40 years of SRO room shelter with no treatment that created a different culture in the downtown east side with different values, different standards for healthcare and security. I mean, it's all worth discussing. But I agree it's all bad.